Hello. So if you're working on this week's assignment, you probably are encountering a problem something like this for number 13. And what you're asked to do is find and simplify this expression, f of a plus h minus f of a, all divided by h. So we're asked to find and simplify this thing. And we're given a function. In this video, I'm going to work on 5x squared minus 7x plus 16. Yours might be a little bit different because the software will change these three coefficients. But the strategy is the same. We are practicing computing some compositions and then simplifying the expression here. Now, this fraction is actually pretty famous from calculus. So later in the course, we will work more with this f of a plus h minus f of a over h. And we even give it a special name. It's called the difference quotient. But for today, it's just an expression that we have to find and simplify. All right. Later, we'll talk more about what this means. Okay, so let's attack this thing. I'm going to move to a new slide so I have a little more space to work. Okay, test. Okay, so sorry about that. My microphone didn't work and I have to redo this whole slide. Anyway, we'll call this take 2 just for kicks because I'm having a little fun tonight with my recording. Okay, so I got to keep an eye on my microphone level and make sure it doesn't kick out on me. So here's that function that we are working on. And notice I marked the x's in green, because I want to make sure everyone understands how function notation works. Whatever's in the parentheses here in my f of x notation, that gets put in place of the x's in the formula. So one of the first things we have to do in that fraction that we're making is f of a plus h. And what that means is wherever I see a green x in my formula, I'm going to replace it with a red a plus h. So it's going to be 5 times a plus h squared. Now, when you're putting in a binomial that has more than one term, so two terms in this case, but a polynomial in general, when you're composing that a plus h, make sure you always put that into your equation where x is in parentheses, because you're going to be performing other operations like squaring it and multiplying by 5, and we need to make sure that we take into account that that's one binomial. So 5 times a plus h squared instead of the 5x squared minus 7 times a plus h squared instead of the 7x. Excuse me, a plus h, sorry. There's no square on that one. And then the plus 16 does not have any green x with it, so it's just a plus 16. Okay? So I've replaced the green x's with the red a plus h's. That's this guy and this guy. Now what we want to do is simplify this a little bit, because later we're going to have to combine some like terms. Okay, so the way we do that over here with the 5a plus h squared, I'll do that in two little steps here. So I'll leave the 5 alone. I'm going to square a plus h, which is a squared plus 2ah plus h squared. And if you're not familiar with squaring a binomial, you can check that out and then come back to the video in this place. The next thing we'll do is we'll distribute that negative 7 to both the a and the h. So that's minus 7a. Ooh, wrong color, dude. Now let's try that again. Minus 7a with a white pencil. And minus 7h, and then we still have the plus 16 on the end. It's hanging around there. Finally, we'll distribute this 5 to all the terms here in the trinomial. Okay? So that's going to be 5a squared plus 10ah plus 5h squared minus 7a minus 7h plus 16. And there are no like terms in this sequence, this polynomial here, so we're done. This is simplified. That's the first piece. That's the f of a plus h. Don't forget we also had an f of a. Okay, so the f of a, we also have to figure out what that is. So we can put that in our fraction. And I recommend that you do these two separately in two pieces. So f of a then is going to be putting an a wherever the green x's are. So 5a squared minus 7a plus 16 again, which of course just equals, in all white, 5a squared minus 7a plus 16. Now, when I move to the next slide, I'm going to start building that fraction and then simplifying it, because that was our goal, to find and simplify that difference quotient. To do that, I will use this piece here for the f of a plus h, and I will use this piece here for the f of a. Okay? So keep an eye on those two, maybe jot those down, because in the next slide we're going to put them in and we'll finish this problem off for the second time. Okay, just want to make sure, yep, my voice is still recording here. So the goal of this problem, remember, was to simplify this difference quotient with f of a plus h minus f of a over h. So in the last slide, we figured out what the expression was for f of a plus h. And I'll be writing that in green right here as I build my new fraction. So I had 5a squared plus 10a h plus 5h squared minus 7a minus 7h plus 16. That was all f of a plus h. It's kind of a long little dude there. Then there's a minus sign right there, that one. And then we have f of a, and I'll write that in yellow over here. So f of a, and it's a trinomial, so I'm going to put in parentheses because we're going to have to distribute that negative. F of a is 5a squared minus 7a plus 16. And then remember, this whole thing is part of a fraction, and the denominator is just h. So right now it looks pretty nasty. But what we'll do is we'll start simplifying this thing. Okay, so one thing I want to point out is that trinomial in yellow there, we have to distribute this minus sign. So that's really a negative 5a. This is really a plus 7a. And then this is really a minus 16a. Or minus 16, sorry, just the 16, no a with that one. And then what we can do, and I'll just use a red pen to do this, is we can combine some like terms. So you see how I have this minus 5a squared right here? That cancels out and makes 0 with the 5a squared. And you see how I have this plus 7a right here? That cancels out with the minus 7a. And you see this minus 16? That cancels out with the green 16 there. And what we're left with is a 10a plus h, or excuse me, a 10ah plus a 5h squared minus a 7h. And everything else is canceled out. And then we still have our h in the denominator. So this is the simplified form for this difference quotient that we wrote out. And then what we usually do to simplify this further is we divide all the terms by h because there's an h in the denominator. So that would be 10ah divided by h. I'm just separating the fraction. Plus 5h squared over h minus 7h over h. And we can do some more canceling and simplifying, right? So here, these h's cancel, and I am left with 10a for that first term. Then this h cancels one of the h's in the h squared, and I'm left with 5h. And finally, down here on the end, the h is canceled in the 7h over h, and I'm left with minus 7. And that is our simplified expression that we're asked to find. So we did all that work, a bunch of stuff canceled, then we divided by h, and we made it to here, which was our goal. So I recommend that you take this in pieces, figure out just what the a plus h piece is, like I did in green, figure out what the f of a piece is, like I did in yellow, line them all up, distribute that minus sign over the f of a terms, and then cross a bunch of stuff out that cancels. And then once you get your smaller fraction, then you can divide each term by h. Good luck with this. I know it's new and it's not easy, but give it a go. If you get stuck, you know where to find me. And in the meantime, take care.